Central Weekly, a weekly podcast from the Central Podcast Network. This is not the first time we recorded this intro, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey.
But we're excited that you're joining us for episode number 52 of the Central Weekly. John Henninger is in the studio.
There's Jared. There is
Eric the Lyday in the podcast studio. Once again, Eric, talk.
Yes, I'm here.
Here's the cool
I'm
thing.
here.
We're in week 2 of the songs we sing, so that means Eric gets to join us one more time for the Central Weekly. And gosh, last week was a great sermon, both of you guys. This week was yet another one. And again, it was such the biggest thing. Worship is a lifestyle, and we got to talk about it because it's a lifestyle, and we have to train ourselves to be in worship to the God that we serve all the time. So we talked a lot about sacrifice, and I'm excited to get into this lesson. And really, you guys are the greatest people for me to talk to about this because this is what you do, worship professionally in a corporate setting.
It feels like that should be on my business card.
But speaking of what's not on your business card, the Lyday, Eric the Lyday, you did not change your Twitter handle.
No, I didn't. I've had a long-standing Twitter handle, Move It Like Lyday.
When's the last time you tweeted, Eric?
Well, in one of the first 7 times we recorded this intro, I had mentioned that I thought it had been a lot longer than it had, and I looked it up, and it was in fact November 22nd, 2021. So,
wow.
Which that's not that long ago.
No, it's really not. It's really not that long ago. There must have been something happen in 2021 where I thought maybe it was time to go back to Twitter. But so my last tweet was that I think my greatest skill is my ability to properly ration my cheese dip to breadstick ratio to where I have an equal amount every bite and use all the cheese dip. I was referring to the plastic container that has the bread and the cheese.
You can put nachos, you can put breadsticks.
Yeah.
It's an institution.
It is.
For people. That yellow cheese.
It's an institution. I like that.
Well, here's the thing. When it comes to nachos, I don't like the nacho cheese to be on the top of my chips because
You want to be the dipper.
I want the power. I'm a control freak, and I don't want soggy chips. I mean, I like a soggy chip, but I want to be the person to soggy it up.
Sure.
So, like I said, we're talking about worship this week. And here's the cool thing. We had a new set on Central. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, go to our YouTube page. You can, these 2 weeks, because you guys are intertwining your lesson and worship.
Yeah.
Just because that's what it should be in our life. We have the whole sermon or the whole lesson on YouTube, so you can watch both weeks. So you should be able to go on YouTube and see the new set. And Eric and the crew did a fantastic job. Aaron was a big instrumental person because, he's our lighting guy. Yep. And it's just neat to see just a clean set.
Yeah.
Super clean.
Yeah. Shout out to Aaron Fadler. He kind of the brains behind our sets always. But he puts in a lot of time and effort and just, I don't know, he's just super talented. He just comes up with stuff he envisions in his brain and can make it translate to our stage, and it always just looks so good.
Yeah.
He's the best.
He's the best. And if you want to hear his episode where he talks about his lighting and his design, go to the Price Podcast because they really need some viewers or listeners.
Yeah.
They just don't have much. So we need to prop them up as much as we can.
As much as we can. Check us out. We're just a low budget operation trying to make it.
Well, here's the cool thing is while we're recording this, we recorded this on a Friday. Guess who gave birth during this recording?
I have a
Eric
guess.
Lyday.
I know as well.
Brooke Paninsky.
Yeah.
So it's really neat that this is the first episode of Central Weekly. Everybody's been waiting for it. That baby Nolan Paninsky is in the world. Yeah. Out here it's going.
What a true miracle.
It really is.
I mean, it's
if you want to hear more about that miracle, you can go to Praise Podcast and check out really Brooke's latest episode on that.
Is that coming out again, or you got?
No, it would have been her last. I don't know what episode it would be, but it would be the updated version of Brooke's story. She has 2 on there, but yeah, you can check that out as well.
Only took you one to talk about yours, but
I don't need, and nobody wants to hear more than one from me. So
yeah, that's the way. I still think that idea that you guys had, John needs to be on the Praise Podcast, and in that Praise Podcast structure. Because I want to hear John's favorite worship music, his worst song that he's led. I want to hear those things.
Yeah, we will. Well, there's probably going to be some openings here for a while because I'm going to be solo since Brooke is. We tried our best to plan and store up a bunch, and we had a bunch store up, but this baby was supposed to come 6 weeks ago, and as you can tell by the date of this, it's not been 6 weeks, so Our cupboard is a bit bare.
Just to be clear, she's not 46 weeks pregnant. I mean, they had thought she was going to go way early.
that's true.
But
There's a new Guinness Book of World Records that has been set.
Well, let's get into the sermon, shall we? Week 2, and you called it "Give to Praise." And I love, it's so funny because when you broke out your definition, Eric, about to attribute worth. One of my worst stories of being a Christian leader, I don't know, I'd say that weird, was at CIY. So we were part of CIY, and we were a camp team for, I think we were for St. Louis Christian College. So we would tour around, and basically we were the residents of CIY, where they just told us what we needed to do. We got our job done. Well, back then, we would lead breakouts. And so they would tell us ahead of time, so we'd have time to prep, like in the spring, hey, in the summer, you're going to talk about worship. So it was me and 2 other super quiet people that do not like to talk. And of course, I like to talk and find enjoyment in it, I guess. And so we had the task of talking to high schoolers about worship. And I thought I knew it. I was in a worship, band lead. I was a creative arts past. No. So here's the thing. I brought up this quote, and I thought it was just such an eloquent quote. Basically, the quote said, and I have to look it up. Here's my paraphrase. Worship is like kissing the face of God. Sounds really cool, right? So for a bunch of high schoolers looking at me, I thought I would be the coolest leader. Again, this is college age. And I said, oh man, and if you really want to worship just hardcore, it's just like making out with God, just worshiping with God. Let's just make out. And they were all like, what are you talking about? Well, I still thought this was the most brilliant thing, and these kids are going to remember this. Well, Jason French, who is actually the president of CIY now, he was the leader that week. He said, Jared, I need to talk to you. And from then on, college teams do not lead breakout lessons anymore. So,
Would your kiss to God have been sloppy wet or unforeseen?
Oh, I'm a sloppy wet. Yeah. This is we're not going to dilute this. I want to hear the illustration. So, but anyways, that was from what song?
How He Loves.
Yeah, How He Loves. That was one of my favorite songs, and that was about the same timeline too. That's probably why I had that going in my head. John Mark McMillan. Yeah. So let's get into your lesson about and your correct definition to attribute worth. Super good. And then you went right into Mark 12:30. And it was just a perfect illustration or a perfect Bible verse to really reiterate to attribute worth.
Yeah, that's Jesus gives kind of the model definition there of what our love looks like into that. And I think when you think about worship, I know last week, I always remember we mentioned Jeremy Redmond last time, but one of the things ding. One of the things that I know he would always emphasize just in his teaching, is that worship really you can break down the word to worthship, like what is it worth to you? And we think about anything. I mean, whatever has value to us, we give it our time, we give it our money, we give it our resources, we give it our attention. Like that's where we put our value, what we value is what we give our attention to. And so it might feel harsh to say, but if you look at the value you give to your worship daily, it kind of tells you where you value your relationship with Jesus.
Yeah. And I've always said that too, that you always are worshiping something. Your time and energy is going to something. So our goal as Christians is to make it to someone. And if that's the difference, and that's what true worship is. And your first big point was our worship should cost us something. And then you went into that, sacrifice word, and John continued that later on. But I think Romans 12:1, living sacrifices, that's what we are called to be. And that is our act of worship. And that's when you brought in the lifestyle word too, because I think a lot of people they think, okay. And it's funny because I catch myself still at 36 years old, still kind of saying, hey, let's go to worship. That's not how we're supposed to go. We're going into the presence of God with our worship. And me going to the grocery store, I don't go too often anymore, we click list, but me doing mundane things can be an act of worship if I'm surrendering those to God. And it costs me something. If I'm at the grocery store and I want my head down and I don't want to be talking to anybody, but then I feel the Holy Spirit say, hey, there's that guy over there, you need to have a conversation with him. That's an act of worship. So continue in that. How does it cost us something, Eric?
Well, what I kind of get into really is, we talked about how obviously worship is a lifestyle, and we kind of, at least in my portion, specifically focused on what that looks like in a corporate worship setting, you know, because it is a lifestyle. It's an everyday thing, every moment thing, no matter what you're doing, it's a part of that. But specifically looking at kind of a corporate worship setting, looking at that, really it should cost us our comfort. Yeah. You know, that if you are, again, it might feel harsh, but if you feel, if you're not pushing yourself, if you feel, you know, and not that like, you should always just feel constant tension and anxiety and discomfort in worship. But I mean, we all know when we're going through the motions, and we all know when we're pushing ourselves and we're opening ourselves and we're stepping outside of what's easy and what's comfortable. And I think that's where the sacrifice is not easy, because sacrifice does cost us something. We have to surrender something for it to be a sacrifice. So, you know, a sacrifice is not necessarily a gift, which John, you know, talked about. A sacrifice is us really probably losing something. Yeah. And so in this scenario, it's us losing our comfort. It's us surrendering our comfort to be uncomfortable, not because that's bad, but because a lot of times what's uncomfortable for us is where we start to find that line of obedience to what God would call us to.
Yeah. Yeah. Surrender leads to obedience. And I think you struck a good balance of calling people out regardless of where they fall on that openness in worship. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where I feel like if you are a person that is very extravagant with your hands and your posture and you're all in, and there's times where God's calling you to be quiet, then you need to be quiet. That's yours. That's getting you out of your comfort zone. I brought this up. Hope is, we all know Hope and Hope Moffitt.
From the Encounter podcast.
Yeah. See, we told everybody, but Hope was talking to Maria because she was preparing a lesson. And she says normally she goes into, preaching and teaching, and she doesn't have notes. She feels she just needs the Bible, and she needs to let the Holy Spirit speak through her. It's uncomfortable for her to prepare notes and to take the time to do that ahead of time. And a lot of times, maybe we think, we have to prepare in order to be Spirit-filled. And for Hope, it's the opposite. Hope feels she's out of her comfort zone when she does have a lot of prep. So this last time that she preached and had this prayer time with some women recently that Maria was there, she told Maria, God called me to be uncomfortable and to actually do some prep work going into this lesson. And so what is it for you? And I hope that was a call to people to say, hey, maybe I do need to step out of my comfort zone. Maybe raising my hands in this worship setting is going to bring me into a better position with my relationship with God. And I love your posture reflects position. So good.
Yeah, because worship looks different for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's so easy, especially in kind of the Christianity church culture,
Christianese,
to look at certain things, whether it's, whoever the latest, greatest, worship group is, whatever, to look at how they do things, to look at what their posture is, to look at how they express themselves in worship, and just assume that that's the right way, or that's the only way, or that's the way that it should be. And not that what they're doing is wrong, but it's just, it's easy to forget that worship looks different for everybody. And so that's, when we start talking about just the different postures, because what is going on inside of us, our posture in worship can be a way to express that on the outside. Yeah. And so, if our heart is in a spot of surrender, a way that we can express that is by lifting our hands. Yeah. It's nothing, the act of lift, it's not like a, hey, look at me kind of thing, but it's just that, hey, I want to express what's going on inside of me on the outside, and lifting your hands, and for some people that next step is just simply opening their mouth and singing, and saying, letting their mind have to think through saying the words of the song, and like I said, for some, it might be to not be jumping around and dancing and doing all that, because that's super comfortable for them. And again, not there's anything wrong with that, but they might need to find themselves sitting in silence. For me, that's something that's an uncomfortable spot for me, because I'm like you, I like to talk to people. I like to be around people. And so sitting in stillness and quietness for extended periods of time is very uncomfortable for me. Yeah. But that's something that that I have to try to push myself in to do, because it's an uncomfortable way for me to worship.
Here's a question for both of you. And I think I know the answer, but our listeners don't. How did you grow up, and what was your form of worship, and what did you see specifically from your parents? What was their, normal worship posture growing up? Because I know for my parents, in the church that we grew up in, there was definitely some people that rose their hands, and it was a very contemporary church, especially for that 90s time frame. Being a contemporary with a band and instruments was a big deal in Southern Illinois at that time. But Dad really never. He mumbled a little bit the words. He knew the hymns a little bit better, but I didn't get a good expression of worship posture from really both mom and dad. That was something I kind of had to learn on my own. What about you guys?
I grew up in kind of a spiritual, there was a big shift in my spiritual upbringing, like from 0 to 12-ish, we were members of a very, very conservative Baptist church. And so that was, no clapping, just straight up singing the songs, and that was pretty much it. And then I think it was in 5th grade, we went to, other side of the spectrum, we went Assemblies of God, and that was just the opposite, hands up, the whole deal.
What was that like? Why? What was the transition there? What was it? How did they say, okay, we're going from one to the next?
It was just, I don't know exactly what drew my parents from one to the other. But to be honest, I think that a big reason that we went to the church that we went to, my dad taught in the Christian school that was part of that church. Okay. And they had kind of to work here, you have to go here kind of a thing. Yeah. And so he left his job there and went to the public school system. And so I think that was probably a point that we moved out of that church, but that's just kind of, so I've got this Baptist-matic, Baptist-matic kind of background. But
sounds like a new vacuum.
That's right.
I would have liked to. I wish you would have been a little bit older too, but I would have loved to just see the faces. Like you go from one to the next. So that first, what is going on?
The first Sunday, I would have loved to see that.
Yeah. That would be. Fun.
And with your parents, your dad was a really outward driven, I don't want to say emotional guy, but he shows his emotion.
Never way outward, but definitely, comfortable raising hands and stuff like that, clapping. Yeah. My sister, I know over the years, dance within context of worship has been controversial in some circles, some church circles. My sister is a ballerina, and so obviously dance was a big part of our household growing up. Not me. I was never much of a dancer myself. But I think my mom's background, my dad's background, the use of really artistic expressions within worship was kind of normalized in our household. Yeah. Because of that.
Yeah. Eric?
Really here. I pretty much spent, I would say, of formative knowing what was going on around me. Was here at Central. So, I witnessed, the Tyler Brown choir days and
worship aerobics.
So I, and Drew and Tommy Walker and all that, and so, really, this has kind of been this has been my main exposure to, as far as what I would say, growing up in years where I actually comprehend what's happening around me.
And your Daryl Evans story was perfectly placed about how, this was a charismatic man with a charismatic background saying, hey, your form of worship, it's a sacrifice. It's to get out of your comfort zone. And then go ahead.
Hold on. So I had never heard anybody say it that way.
Yeah.
And I always, like I said, living the back half of my, teenage years and all that inside of that kind of charismatic context. It was very much like hey, if we're going to talk about stretching ourselves in worship, it is definitely, how far can we go, hands up, moving around, jumping, whatever it is. And I never heard anybody phrase it like that until Daryl, we were having that conversation with Daryl, and just knowing the context he's coming from, being immersed in that charismatic world, I just thought that was, Eric and I both thought it was just a really insightful thing to say, that it just, if the waving your arms around and the external worship stuff, not that any of that is wrong, but if that's what comes easy to you, then consider the fact that maybe your sacrifice of praise from time to time is to sit and be still, and to just sit in the stillness of God.
Yeah. And that was coming from, pretty well, at least to my remembrance, everywhere we went with him, there was always at least 2 flags in the room,
For sure.
And so,
whatever room you went in, bathroom.
That's
Where'd you guys come from? Yeah. And it's funny because anytime I hear a song from that era, Trading My Sorrows is one of them. I can almost remember the set list from. It was senior year going into freshman in college. Again, this was about the same summer that I mentioned the worship quote. But it's funny because Trading My Sorrows, I remember leading in worship. That's the summer Marie and I met. Trading My Sorrows was one of those songs.
Yeah.
And it is just weird how songs can bring you back to that exact moment.
Yeah.
My girls went to We Will CG this last summer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the theme song for the week was Trading My Sorrows. And I was like, it's back. I texted Daryl, actually. I was like, hey, if your Spotify payout goes up a little bit, you can thank my girls,
Great guitar player, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
He is I remember that. He was a killer guitar player.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the girls, I really like, John, now going into your part of the lesson, your eggs, your egg story with the girls. Because really, that was their form of sacrifice. And you went in a little more into detail with Cain and Abel. Go into that for us.
So Cain and Abel, that is the first recorded sacrifice to God. Genesis 4, and, Cain... and Abel made 2 different sacrifices. One brings the best of, and one brings just some of. Yeah. And so, it's not that Cain shows up empty-handed. That's not the truth. He brings something, but it's just what he thought was sufficient and not what God was asking for. And honestly, there's not really even a whole lot of scriptural context as to how they knew what they were supposed to bring. But it's pretty clear that Abel knew, I'm going to bring the first fruits. I'm going to bring the best of what I have as a sacrifice to God. And Cain did not. And then even once he didn't, God said, you too could be made right. You could be accepted as well. And you have to just do what's right in the sight of the Lord. And obviously we know that story ended in bloodshed.
And I don't think what your point didn't come up yet at that point in the lesson, but it really, like you said later on, about that when we don't follow and we don't have a life of sacrifice, that opens the door to sin. It did in Cain's life.
Right.
There's a jealousy that happened. There's, and it was just crazy. The first brothers killed. Yeah.
Well, and I think when John was talking about the story, what always stands out to me in that story, talking about the cost of worship, was, I think the reality was what Abel brought. When he killed that lamb, that lamb was dead. Yeah, Cain's crops would grow back.
That's a good point.
And so they were when he killed that animal, the animal was done, gone. That was over with.
That's really good.
And Cain's crops he knew that they'd eventually grow back. Yeah. And so I think I don't know what God was thinking, but I think that's really plays into the idea, the cost of that.
Yeah, that's really, really good.
Yeah. And then, back to the eggs. Here's the question I have for you guys. Super good transition here. How do you prefer your eggs? The girls made you scrambled eggs, because I think most little girls would make scrambled eggs. What's the way? If you have to order them, what do you go?
Scrambled.
Scrambled?
Yeah, I'm not a big eggs guy, so
really?
Scrambled.
I do not like a
I thought you guys would have a big... I'm an over medium. I don't like it to run a lot, but I like it to be... I don't like it to just go all over my plate, but I like it to be a firm firm ooze.
Nope. No ooze. No.
This conversation did not go the way I thought. I thought we were going to have.
No.
Yeah. If I brought up pizza or what's your favorite pizza or hamburger, you guys would be all out of it.
No, I'm not opposed to a little bit of run on. If you're going to put an egg on a burger, then I don't want a ton. I don't want it to be like dripping down my face, but.
I asked you that question last night.
Yeah. Even you put an egg on a burger, though. I mean, if it's too runny, it gets in your bun. It's hard to eat. It gets soggy. I would take no egg over a runny egg, but ideally a firm.
Over hard.
Yeah,
that's
right.
Yeah. Number one.
Is that what it's called? Over hard?
Yeah, over hard is when it doesn't ooze out, but you still see the yolk. You still have a definite yolk and a white egg. The girls have been asking for eggs. Amelia likes the kind of
working
a little variety.
Waffle House on the side? Or?
I've got a grill here, a skillet here. Yeah, I got 5 kids.
Nice.
We go through, when we make eggs and they're all at home for breakfast, we do about 8 to 9 eggs.
Wow.
For everybody. Because I'll have 2.
I didn't know we were talking about how good we've been doing.
So
$40.
I know that really is. That's just true.
Yeah, wow.
We've got some
we
friends.
Get it, Jared. You're rich.
Now, let's go. Number 1, he wants our best. Speaking of best, here's the thing. You brought up David and Gad. And how David and Gad kind of called David out on this.
Yeah, well, Gad was the man who was speaking on behalf of God to David. And, David had sinned in the eyes of the Lord. He had taken a census that he shouldn't have taken, and so God was displeased. And God really originally God gave 3 options for a punishment to David, and David said, if I'm going to fall into the hands of somebody, I'm going to fall into the hands of God, so let our people go through this plague. And a bunch of people were dying in the Israelite nation, and so Gad speaks on behalf of God and comes to David and says, you need to make a sacrifice and go to go to this threshing floor, go by this threshing floor. And so anyways, David goes to make the sacrifice, and that the rest of the story is what we talked about.
Yeah. And I think it was really insightful that you pointed out that a lot of times, similar to what we talked about with Cain and Abel, that we only like to do the sacrifice if it's convenient for it.
Sure.
We don't want to sacrifice the significant. Just like with Abel, it was significant for him to bring that animal sacrifice, because that animal was probably going to give him maybe milk, I'm guessing. I love your joke about the goat from Christmas. That was really funny for the sacrifice. But can you imagine a world today where we still had animal sacrifices going on? Like, just that would just be crazy. I mean, we still have animals that we eat and we do that, but if that was an act of worship, that's crazy. Because our jobs would basically be like just a bloody job all day. That would be our jobs, not worship and talking on a podcast. We'd be out sacrificing animals and everything drained. Yeah, that's all I got. So, thank you, Jesus. That's all I got to say. Thank you, Jesus. Yeah, PETA would not allow animal sacrifices to be happening today. So here's the thing. How are you sacrificing your time for the deep and meaningful? Because you brought up the point, John, we only do it if we have time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, really David really makes that an important determination there, right? I mean, he says, I'm not going to make a sacrifice. I won't just give a burnt offering that doesn't cost me anything. And so often we will say, yeah, I'm down to give God this or that, but it's the easy out thing, it's the easy to part with, the stuff that's not really significant to us. But, I said it later, the heart of praise is, we're talking about the songs we sing, and that's for sure a part of it, but the heart of praise is not always singing, but it is always surrender of some sort. And, to Eric's point, to David's point, God honoring praise, God honoring worship will always cost you something.
Yeah. And I loved you gave us some examples. The Dunahy, that was something that I don't know if God was calling me to, if I would get in that tent and start cutting fingernails. That's one of...
And she said, I don't know if you saw this or not, but she said that because this man had stroke,
Eric's gotta leave the
he
room.
wasn't able... He wasn't able. He couldn't, he couldn't just basically take care of his feet.
Yeah.
And so JL got in there and washed his feet, and his toenails had grown and curled around the ends of his toes. And JL got in there and cut this homeless man's toenails. Golly, just it's a legitimate sacrifice of praise.
It really is. It does remind me of Dumber and Dumber, your favorite movie, John.
Yeah, that is my number one movie of all time.
He's holding on, and then they got
the grinder.
but that's on a funny note. This was a serious note. And it was, I mean, it really is funny because you asked for that photo about, when we prayed for them. And JL had a comfortable business. I mean, he was doing really good with, working with his construction in Salem, and God called him to something else. And I think you said that the point of this is not that you start a homeless ministry. God might be calling you into that and you need to follow that. Right. But it really is just to say, hey, this is what are you doing, because you want to be giving God your best.
I mean, really, the point of the service is not that we would walk away from whatever, God has in us in right now and just go start a homeless ministry. But the point of the service is really that we would everybody would take a step closer in our faith. We would all come one measure closer to being willing to worship in a sacrificial way. And I think the best way to start that journey is to understand that he is honored most when we give him our best.
Yeah. Good short series. Super good. Glad you were both
good job,
able
Eric.
to do it.
Same to you all. It'll be sad not to be here next week with you all.
We can't have you back. Even if you wanted to be, we couldn't have you
come back. Well.
And here's the cool thing. It leads us into the incredible acts of sacrifice in worship is going to be a big topic in your next series, John, where you're talking about a credible account.
Yeah.
Talk about that for us.
So a credible account is basically just a series that we're going to do. Like, there are so many stories in the Bible that are so incredible that they almost seem
can't be true.
like they wouldn't be true. But because they are found in the inerrant Word of God, right? Because they come from the most credible account that there is, we know that they're true. So what lessons can we learn from them?
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. You're going to look at the fiery furnace. You're going to look at Jesus' miracles. You're going to look at the
Red Sea.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Whale's
And then
jar.
that leads into, so we got 6 weeks. That leads, the 6th week is the greatest miracle of all, the resurrection.
The resurrection
of Jesus Christ. I think that's going to be Easter, right, Eric?
Yeah.
You tease us with something from Easter that you got. Have you started that planning yet?
Yeah, we've started Easter planning.
You got 7 weeks.
I don't know. I don't know if I have any great teasers at the moment.
You got a song?
Yeah, we got songs.
You got some songs?
Yeah, we've got songs.
That does sound good.
Worship songs?
What's the soup du jour?
Think we'll do communion?
I think we'll probably focus on the resurrection of Jesus.
I like that.
And
I told somebody the other day, another pastor texted me and said, hey, have you guys got any plans for Easter? I said, I think we're going to focus on the resurrection.
Yeah.
He didn't like.
Yeah, he didn't laugh. I mean, it'll be something you want to be at.
Yeah.
I think it will be a powerful time of worship and celebration.
Yeah. So that's it for the songs we sing. I'm looking forward to a credible account coming up next. And here's the cool thing is I'm in talks. Hopefully over the next 6 weeks, our guests will be missionaries that we have that Central sponsors. And our hope is that you can hear some credible accounts from them about how God is moving and working and doing some incredible things in their ministries, from Africa to Taiwan to Japan to India, all in the name of Jesus Christ. So our hope is that over the next 6 weeks, as you zero in on some stories from the Bible, we can always zero out or zero in, I don't know, zone. Yeah, we're going to hear some stories. That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So thanks for joining us, Eric. We're going to let you back to your little podcast so you can have some fun over there.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go back to my lonely place. No Brooke. No. It's just gonna be me.
It's gonna be good though. Because what are you planning? What do you got next?
Well, we see. This airs on Sunday,
So
right?
tomorrow
so
you got
it's
one
Monday. What do we have coming? We've got an episode that'll drop tomorrow.
Yeah.
We've recorded it a while back, so
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember about what we talked about. But I remember it being good. I remember liking it
because you've had two share your stories.
Yeah.
The last two, and then this one I think is just a conversation.
Yeah,
right?
we did Lee's story, then Nate, and then this one's just Brooke and I.
Yeah.
And gosh, I really can't remember what we talked about, but
you're just gonna have to check it out.
Listen to it.
All of the podcasts from the Encounter podcast to the Central Weekly and Praise podcast can all be found at the centralnow.com/podcast, part of the Central Podcast Network. We're super glad that you listened. Make sure to share with a friend and tell people about how God is moving in your life this week, because that's what we're doing here on the Central Weekly. Thanks for joining us, and see you later, guys.